So Trump was indicted again, 7 more charges. Meanwhile, simultaneously, Biden bribes evidence is protected. It's a same-day story. We get an alien whistleblower. We get direct energy weapons pointed at the sky, tricking military radar. Mainstream alien sighting reports, Ukrainian false flag attempts. The Greater Eurasian Partnership, inclusive of Russia, are literally weekly adding more nations to BRICS, completing all contracts to build the INSTC. Middle Eastern countries, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Oman and UAE are building their own navy to protect the Gulf. De-dollarization, the collapse of the US by design, for a purpose. In politics, you never let a good crisis go to waste. NATO has admitted it is at war. Russia has been provoked 3 times and held its nerve. The counter-offensive failed. 4,000 Ukrainians dead in 3 days. Each side accused the other over Kakhovka Dam. Russia suffered losses and had no reason, so Ukraine argues for self-sabotage. It makes no sense. If NATO via Janis Sartis admits this, then the West is spending. The West is cleaning out its old weaponry, its expired stock. The military-industrial complex now completely booked out for new weapons, bigger budgets and new stocks. In a perpetual spendathon on printed money, a fiat currency allows for endless war without having to raise taxes, said RFK Jr. this week. The outcome of war through displacement provides shade and blur to the value of this perpetual capital expansion. It, by definition, provides for distribution by self-interest and absolute power. That is what this is. The authorities who illegally run the planet on a country-by-country basis, overseen voluntarily before the United Nations, have suddenly got a bee in their bonnet about us and the damage we're doing. But who must all be saved by this one solution to this problem that makes you really sick, but to which we will not publicly investigate the true origins of now, widely accepted as 99.9% escaped from a lab. Still, the fact-checkers say it was likely of zoonotic origin. Well, that is a lie. The WHO at its annual World Health Assembly that ended last week initiated its plan to create its Health Voice, an instrument agreed to by non-rejection with an 18-month time limit. They are creating a Trojan horse for compulsory medicine, first by way of digital identification and vaccine passports. Vaccine mandates are finally over before they start again, seemingly. This is a big investment and big risk for them. It's obviously unconstitutional for our country to give away our sovereignty, but the Voice opens another Trojan horse. I weep for my country, for all our countries and their peoples, because even China and her allies support the WHO. But not the WEF, yet many have visited the WEF, some disgusted, some not convinced. Should NATO-aligned Western and European nations bankrupt themselves as their soon-to-be $36 trillion US debt delivers a sovereign debt collapse? Who can bail them out but a total reset? And in order to get that, everyone needs to go down. There is no justice system anymore. There is no mainstream media. There is no public respect for God. There is no debate or conversation. But there is this sheer determination to provide the details to drag every last one of my species into the new era. That is the Great Awakening. Well, there you go. That was a bit of a recap from the week of news. 1 week of news, and you get all of that in the lead up to what we're going with today. Now, we have a problem on Facebook, social media. So if you have got this far already on the replay or you're watching live, just encouraging you to look at other ways to get your news via Twitter at JasonQCitizen1, also at YouTube, which I've posted the link on the Facebook page today, and we'll be setting up, we have a Rumble page that we'll also have to work out how to go live there as well. It's just torturous. But anyway, we'll continue on with the show. Simon, welcome. Welcome. What a week it has been so far.
Hi there, Jason. Yeah, it's an interesting end to the week. Trump now has 37 felony counts announced against him, and they actually took the step of releasing the indictment in full so we could all see what exactly is going to be kicking off next week. Interestingly enough, a whole load of Trump's legal team have resigned. Two of his lawyers on this case, one of whom supposedly was quite significant, and another lawyer from his New York case as well. So now that he's finally finished playing golf, which he seemed to spend most of the day doing, he has been putting out a torrent of messages. I think it's now either 11 or 12 messages that he's put out on Truth Social. And one of which was an announcement that he will indeed be looking for new lawyers. So
now there could be a strategy behind that, of course, or it could just be that he's just made too many faux pas and no one wants to work with him. What's the thought there?
Well, there's the possibility that he could have one or two lawyers resign every few months, and then he goes to the judge and says, I need to delay the start of the hearing because all these people have to read through hundreds of pages of documents, and it's going to take them 2 months to do that, and therefore I want a delay. That will work possibly 2 or 3 times, but it doesn't look good to the public, and I'm sure the prosecutor is going to resist it. But at the end of the day, Trump, whether they're coming or going, just needs trustworthy legal representation, because as we saw with the advice that he was getting in the last days of his presidency, he just had really lawyers that weren't acting in his best interests at all. And that was clear to everyone that was going to visit him in the White House, both Flynn and Powell and Byrne and the My Pillow guy. They were all saying that he just had the most appalling lawyers, all of whom went to work for Democrat-connected law firms, like a week after they left office with him. So it really makes you wonder. He seems to choose these people almost on their television likability, as opposed to their kind of real legal skills. And he's got real problems at the moment. Now turns out that some of his own staff, political staff, as opposed to kind of like, Mar-a-Lago general employees, were both filming and photographing the storage situation regarding the documents, which was in literally like a toilet area with a shower. It's just been pointed out recently that above the top of the shower curtain in the picture, you can actually see that there are boxes piled even higher in the bathtub. I mean, he's staying in a really quite significantly large facility. Why you would have to put any kind of records actually in the bathtub just seems absolutely bizarre. But the point there really was that he had untrustworthy staff who all seem to have been given evidence to this Mr. Smith bloke, the independent prosecutor, who had previously gone to work from having been based in Tennessee to going to work at the International Criminal Court. And just, ever since Trump took office, it's just staggering how he had a TV series based upon hiring people and firing people, and yet he just seems to have been surrounded by traitors and buffoons. And it really, really makes one wonder. I mean, frankly, my own opinion is kind of irrelevant, but I would have thought that a lot of people at this point would be having real second thoughts about whether or not they honestly believe that he would drain the swamp at the second attempt as opposed to appointing people like Bill Barr and Ray and
keeping Fauci
Meadows and people like that. His defense secretary, not the acting one at the end, but the guy before that, what was it, Vesper or something? Just person after person after person that were just disastrous picks. Even now, those picks are still kind of like blowing back on him, because it looks like Meadows has completely flipped on him in return for immunity. And it would appear that several of his own personal assistants have all given evidence against him to the grand jury. So, his daughter and son-in-law have abandoned him. They were never good appointees to the White House staff in the first place. I just, between that and the vax, I understand that in the polling for a potential primary, that he's way ahead. But that's really just the cult of personality. And at some point, it has to go from bluster to actual effective government, and not just effective government and dealing with our adversaries, but also just having the ability to make decent appointments so that basic tasks get conducted on a timely basis. I mean, even when he was trying to get the American forces out of Syria, he got stuffed on that. Milley was clearly betraying him every second that he got. He put up with Fauci, he put up with Comey, put up with Redfield, he put up with Birx. I mean, the list is just enormous. And, now that there appears to be audio of him showing people top secret classified documents, acknowledging on the tape that he didn't declassify them whilst he was president before he removed them from the White House. So essentially admitting his guilt to people on I say tape, but on audio, that it looks like his own staff were making recordings of him. So I think it's reasonable to suggest that he's been overcharged. Does he deserve 20 years in prison? Probably no. It's very interesting that the prosecutor, in his extremely brief press conference that he gave today, at 3 p.m. New York time on Friday, at which he took no questions, but stated that he wanted the trial to begin as fast as possible, consistent with Trump's due process rights. So it does look like they're trying to get a conviction before the presidential election. Now, the issue that Roger Stone has brought up today, on a brief break from the alien coverage, which has been going on all week on InfoWars, which unfortunately caused us to be bumped twice, from Tuesday to Friday, and then late last night from Friday today until 2 p.m. Eastern time on Monday. In theory, you and I will be appearing for an hour with Alex Jones on InfoWars at that time, assuming that he doesn't decide to spend a few more days talking about interdimensional beings and space aliens and UFOs. So I can't really explain that, to be honest, but obviously it's his show. He can talk about whatever he wants, and he can have whatever guests on when he wants, if he wants. So I know that there have been a lot of people reaching out to me, asking what's going on, haven't had perfect explanations. I know you've had people reaching out to you as well. But frankly, maybe it's more important to associate ourselves with an important news day and less with aliens. So we'll see what happens next week. But getting back to Trump, very short press conference, guy saying that Trump is innocent until he's proven guilty. He's actually facing felony charges, so it's not like a couple of felonies and a load of misdemeanors. If convicted, he's looking at least 20 years in prison. So, that would be what given he's like 75 or something. Death sentence. Yeah.
So all of the mocking of Biden with the garage and the classified documents that were held in there that wasn't as when he was president from vice president, even as a senator. Many people are saying that but Trump was president, he had the right to declassify. But now there's some audio evidence that says that he didn't. He acknowledged that he didn't declassify. So I wonder what the distraction or the point was of going after Biden and making a comparison when he was equally as sloppy.
Well, a couple of things. One, it turns out that under the Nuclear Secrets Act from 1946, as amended, even a president can't declassify anything to do with the creation or protocols for the use of nuclear weapons. So even the president can't declassify that. Those are secret for decades and decades and decades. So he's got a problem on that. Some of the documents apparently were classified top secret. They did relate to, in some cases, NATO allies. So they'll be horrified about how that kind of information was being stored. It appeared that he was literally showing them to people without any kind of security clearance. One, in part to boast, and two, in part simply to vindicate his assertions after subsequent news stories had proved true. I mean, it's almost like that guy who was leaking all the information about Ukraine on the video game chat room, simply because he wanted to prove to his internet friends that he had a security clearance and he was seeing all kinds of important information. I mean, there was no real function for Trump doing this. It literally was just for his ego. And it's got him into a hell of a lot of trouble. And it really demonstrates, along with all the appointments, up to this day, and I mean that literally, that just really, really bad judgment. Just picking unreliable staff, unreliable cabinet members, and then just reckless behavior. Now, I'm not suggesting for a second that he's alone in this, but Biden doesn't seem to have had anything like these number of close employees flip on him. And that really is the difference, whether or not it's possible to get a conviction. And so this could easily drag on for years and years and years. It doesn't do the country any good whatsoever.
No.
It also causes one to question the situation that has doubtless existed for the last 2 days, that the entire political class, for want of another phrase, in the United States and all of the media is just obsessed with this story. Okay, but we've got a lot of other events are going on into the world, and it'd be nice if we can transition into those now. I really don't intend, but you obviously on your radio show with TNT, will probably be obliged by the station management to cover this as developments occur. But I don't want to be one of the 20 kindergartners chasing the soccer ball.
Yep. No, fair enough. Let's move along. Imran Khan's tweet that came out today is it just confirms what we've been saying all along. He says, "Today I've broken the world record, not in cricket, but by having to appear in 20 cases, which is a new world record. Cases ranging from murder to terrorism to sedition. Amazingly, when I was confined in NAB jail, 9 more criminal cases were slapped on me. Having always respect the rule of law, I've been running from pillar to post to ensure that I don't miss a single court hearing of the 150 cases I have been charged with. This level of victimisation has not only completely discredited the imported government, but is now obvious that this fascism unleashed on us is because they are petrified of losing the elections to PTI. Unfortunately, is also a terrible indictment of our legal system, the way laws can be so blatantly abused to victimise opponents. In a free, democratic society, such violations of citizens' fundamental, I'll just remove that, rights is inconceivable. And that's been viewed by almost 3 million people at this stage, Simon.
Well, that just confirms what I said a couple of weeks ago, that when he's got 150 cases in provincial courts all over the country, that it makes it almost unmanageable. Right? I mean, Trump's got New York and Miami now. It seems likely that within a couple of months he's going to have another case against him in Atlanta, Georgia. So that's going to be 3 different states he's going to have to bounce around. But, Imran Khan, it appears that his bail has been extended for these 20 cases.
Yep.
So that's good news for him for the moment. His wife faces a bail hearing next week, I believe, on the 13th of June. Other people have been arrested and immediately rearrested. The journalist Imran Khan, he's still missing. He's been missing for over 3 weeks now. Poor Gonzalo Lira in Ukraine, I'd like to mention him. He's still being held incommunicado. And then, of course, Julian Assange lost his extradition hearing in the UK. He's got one more appeal avenue, and he's already filed paperwork to go before the European Court of Human Rights. But things are looking pretty stinky for him as well. Obviously, the other real big news out of the UK today was concerning Boris Johnson. He was given a copy of the parliamentary report from the Standards Committee, just so that he would have a chance to get his response prepared. And instead of drafting up a document, whether or not he agreed or disagreed or accepted punishment or apologised or whatever, he instead went before the committee and said, "F you, I hereby resign with immediate effect."
Yeah.
So Boris Johnson is no longer an MP, and that's just literally hours after his other long-term supporter, Nadine Dorris, also resigned, though that may have had more to do with her giving a TV interview where she talked about her interaction with the government disinformation unit in relation to Ukraine, which was probably a violation of the Official Secrets Act. And so, she was threatened with criminal prosecution. So she resigned, Boris is resigned, but ironically, only after he has submitted his ex-prime minister's list of award nominations to get a whole load of his cronies bumped up into the House of Lords. And you remember that Liz trusted that, even though she was only prime minister for 46 days or something like that, And at the same time, we've had Ardern being nominated by her ex-colleague, who's now the current New Zealand prime minister. I mean, it's just, the British 2-tier political system is an absolute laughing stock at this point. We've got some, scientists and architects and engineers and stuff who have been appointed onto high state committees that do genuinely seem to scrutinise primary legislation very, very carefully. But the fact that the government neither used the Parliament Act to override that Parliament Act in 1919 or simply appoint 50 flunkies who have made a whole load of financial contributions to the House of Lords on life peerages. I mean, these people aren't appointed for 5 or 10 years. They're appointed till they die. So if they're 50 years old, they could be there for 50 years.
Yeah.
I mean, it is absolutely absurd. I mean, Nigel Farage was suggesting that, we need to have reform there. I mean, at least in Australia, your Senate is elected, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, why the hell Britain can't do that? There's just no good reason whatsoever. If they've managed to reform in Canada and Australia, then they can simply copy Australia if they need to, right? But that situation is an absolute shambles. There's now talk that that Boris might, because he was in a very marginal seat, funnily enough, of quite a high Indian population in Uxbridge, which is in West London, right on the outskirts of the greater city area, and that it was almost certain that he would lose his seat in the next election. This now provides for him to have a neat segue, take 6 months off, go make a few more millions doing some speeches, and then apply to represent a different constituency that he doesn't even, unlike America, have to live inside the boundaries of, and stand for re-election in, the latest will be January of 2025. But I mean, he's, believe it or not, he's still a popular figure within the Conservative Party. There's talk now that this will induce another leadership challenge against Sunak. But what's the point? If Johnson is gone, right, and he's not in the House of Lords, the King can't appoint him to be Prime Minister. He won't run for re-election immediately, it would appear. So even if somebody does defeat Sunak, it does mean that there's somebody else, like yet another person, as Prime Minister for 18 months. Even the top 5 priorities that Sunak announced like a couple of months ago that he was going to focus on for his remaining time in office, the immigration, sending people to Rwanda, like the previous Australian government was sending the boat people coming from Indonesia. They were all being sent, what was it, to like Christmas Island or something?
Yes.
Right? So the plan was to copy that Australian model and send the migrants to Rwanda. But, Rwanda's involved in the civil war in the Congo. It's recently had appalling floods. It was Patel who was pushing that. And, sorry, not Patel, her replacement, Braverman, the current Home Secretary. And a lot of the policies that she's been advocating are getting gutted, including some of her immigration reforms. They're now talking about renting cruise ships and putting thousands of migrants in cruise ships. And they're trying to change aspects of the human rights legislation so that the hotel rooms that they're putting all these migrants in, which is costing the government £7 or £8 million a day just for hotel rooms, that they can put bunk beds in them so they can accommodate them 4 to a room. But no doubt they'll all get left-wing lawyers and say that's against their human rights because it restricts their ability to have conjugal affairs or something. And so, that will probably get ruled illegal by some left-wing judge. I mean, the UK is just in a state of literally, it was in a state of managed collapse, and now one can argue whether or not it's even a managed collapse. I mean, the Labour opposition party are saying that they're going to stop all the domestic natural gas and oil production in order to meet their net zero targets. I mean, no, it is literally national suicide, just like Australia is doing.
Yeah, it seems it's going all around the West, doesn't it? It's absolutely frustrating. Now let's just change it up a bit because I want to get into some of the details we've discovered this week involving the war with Russia and Ukraine. This is a tweet now deleted from the NATO representative Janice Sartz. Can you explain what's going on here in this tweet? This is a big deal.
Yeah, it was. And I broke this story on InfoWars and with your colleagues at TNT. They actually interrupted a live broadcast in order that this story could be covered yesterday. Now, fortunately, I took that screenshot. Now, for people who are just listening rather than reading or can't read the small print, this was at the conference of the NATO Strategic Command Center of Excellence in Riga. And the Director General of the organization that specializes basically in propaganda and cognitive warfare, he was giving the closing remarks at their annual conference. And he was speaking to a room of kind of civilian IT workers, journalists, and military officers. And he said, and this is a direct quote, as represented on their official Twitter feed. And it's very, very concerning because this basically was a declaration of war. So it wasn't like some kind of illegal recording. It wasn't one of his staff members who was saying this like in a bar. This was actually put out on the NATO Strategic Command official Twitter feed. And it reads, every person in this room is in a war here. Every person on the streets of Riga is in a war. Every person in Brussels is in a war. I hope you all recognize it. We cannot fail. And then it had hashtag stand with Ukraine, just in case it wasn't completely obvious what he was talking about. And frankly, when he says every person on the streets of Riga, he's talking about every civilian man, woman, and child is in a war. So that's total warfare. It's not cognitive warfare. It's not hybrid warfare. It's total warfare when every man, woman, and child is at war. So it's not a step up. It's not 2 steps up. It's as far as you can go. And the only thing that hasn't been done yet is to, push the far button on the nuclear missiles. Now, that was on that account for about 6 hours. I verified it with your colleague Chris. They actually wanted to check it before I was allowed to go on air. Did the same thing with Harrison Smith just before the end of his show at approximately noon New York time yesterday. And when I went to check on it about 6 hours later, it had actually been deleted, even though it was essentially an official government account. And that kind of thing's supposed to go into the public record. But obviously they were horrified at his comments. I had sent it to about 50 journalists, only 2 of whom even retweeted it. Now, it did get quite a lot of traction on my Twitter account. Several thousand people viewed it. But given the severity of the statements, and it's amazing that Tucker Carlson didn't run with it, Dan Bongino, some of these other kind of really big names. Now, I reposted it this morning because it had been deleted, and I thought that in itself was a story. Interestingly enough, George Galloway and Ian Muir of the Scottish newspaper, they both tweeted it out twice, the original story and the cancellation.
Yep.
So, several 100,000 people did get to see it. But, it's just sad people are more interested in... I saw some video that was like an AI-created video of a cat dancing, had like several 100,000 views. And here's the head of cognitive warfare for NATO saying we're at war for Ukraine. And like people are like, well, I've got a lead umbrella I'll put up if I need to.
Yeah. It's crazy, isn't it? Look, let's continue with some of the other tweets that we've seen over the last day or so. I'm going to put them up on screen here. You might not have seen this one. Lord Bebo tweets, sure, it's Putin's last stand, not some other dudes. The heading here in the week says that Putin's last stand, what is at stake in Ukraine's major counter-offensive. I'll just plant that seed there. We'll continue. Here's another one. Putin, first, we can safely state that the offensive has begun. We know this from the fact that the Ukrainian army tapped its strategic reserves. Second, the Ukrainian troops failed to achieve their goals in all combat sectors, which is clear as day. That's Putin. There's another tweet here. This is Lord Bebo again. Pointing out Ukraine began a strong artillery shelling. The entire line is under attack, but especially in the direction of Rabatino. This is a prelude of another attack on Russian positions, which are holding for multiple days now. The night will be hot. And we get an article out of Politico that the Pentagon is freaking out about a potential war with China. So let's just steer the ship there, Simon. There's a lot happening, of course, in the war since and the dam being in Kakhovka dam being hit as well.
So obviously we discussed the dam on your you used that on your radio show yesterday.
Yes,
the conversation we had about that. So there's been a lot of statements since then from the Russian defense minister and Putin himself, quite cheerful that the Ukrainians, the poor guys who have been sent against Russian prepared defensive positions, appear that they're just being obliterated by anti-tank weapons and the Russian Alligator helicopter gunships, so the Ka-52s. They're called the Alligator. They're the Russian version of the Apache gunship that the Americans used to use in Afghanistan, and that Prince Harry flew on his second tour when he went from the infantry to flying helicopters. Now, that's going to cause an interesting situation. Not only are the Biden administration already kind of like making excuses for that, we're on like day 4 or 5 of the offensive. Supposedly it started during the night on Sunday night. So, we're on, day 5. It looks like the Ukrainians are just taking massive casualties. And it's just flat out sad. It would appear almost certain that they're not going to achieve any of their strategic objectives, and they're absolutely not going to expel the Russians from all parts of Ukraine, including Crimea. It's just absolutely out of the question. So the next issue is what's going to happen next once the killing stops. They had 12 brigades. They used half of them in Bakhmut. So let's say they've got 5,000 per brigade if they're fully manned, which is doubtful. They've got 30,000 troops. They've just lost 4,000. They'll have had a whole load of wounded. So let's say they got 20,000 left. It's pretty hard to see really what 20,000 could significantly achieve. Mm. But let's say it goes on till the end of the month. They're going to want the bad news to stop so that it's not the focal point of the July 4th weekend Independence Day holiday in America. Mm. And I realize that is trivial and irrelevant if you're a Ukrainian person who's just lost your son, your brother, or your husband. But, that's what the evil, fickle American politicians are kind of like focused on at this point. And what's interesting is the president of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, phoned Z today. Oddly, the Chinese specified that the call took place at Ramaphosa's request. I don't know why they made that distinction. And he told Z that South Africa and 5 other African nations supported the Chinese peace proposal, which was new, because previously the president of South Africa had said that they had their own proposal because the Americans and the Ukrainians had already rejected the Chinese one, and that in the coming days, he and these other presidents or prime ministers from across Africa were going to be flying to Ukraine and to Moscow to see Zelensky and Putin in order to reiterate the need for what the plan essentially advocates is a ceasefire, withdrawals, and negotiations. Mm. Now, I've noticed that some other nations have suggested that there be a ceasefire, that each side withdraw 30 kilometers, and then UN peacekeepers go in, and then they redo the referendums under UN control. I think that the Russians would be willing to accept that, but the Ukrainians definitely won't, because they're very worried now that all the millions of people in the states that the Russians now control, many of whom have taken Russian citizenship in the last year, will all vote to stay with Russia and therefore be part of the Great Eurasian Partnership, as opposed to voting for themselves to be executed. If the Ukrainians were to be welcomed back in, they find out they've taken Russian citizenship and they literally will execute them in a ditch. So, the outcome of those referendums are just foregone conclusions. So I can't see that working. But after that, we'll have had the Turks' proposals, we'll have had the UN proposals, we'll have had the African proposals, we'll have had the Chinese proposals. Like Blinken and the White House and the British and NATO are saying we can't even have a ceasefire because that would reward Putin and enable his forces to develop their defensive positions even more. And it's just fight, until there's literally no men left. They've already got 60,000 women volunteers in the Ukrainian armed forces. So next they'll go to conscripting women. That half the population of the country has left. They're just going to literally run it down to there's literally a few people like running the lights or something, and that's it. Then what are they going to do? They're going to hand the whole country over to the Israelis or something? Yeah. It's just getting absurd. Now, what's interesting is we've had JFK has very much come to solidify his position on this issue. And
you mean RFK? Sorry.
Oh, sorry, RFK. And has, more so than almost anybody else in the U.S. Congress, stated that it was kind of like it was funded by the American government and Soros, and was basically a color revolution in 2014, and that it was a genocidal campaign against the Russian speakers of Donbass, which is consistent with what Professor Mearsheimer and people like Oliver Stone tried to get out into the public domain.
Yeah.
But, is way beyond almost anybody else has been willing to say in the US Senate or the House of Representatives. And hopefully, a few more tens of millions of people will get to see that message, because it is the truth. I mean, and, we've also got other people who've been coming out pointing out that, this all dates back to 1991 even, when the Russians agreed to withdraw from East Germany and allow the reunification of Germany to occur. So, this has been a long time coming. This story that it's like completely unprovoked is categorically not true. But, even for a ceasefire, it's really hard to see even how that can be negotiated, given all the revelations about the Minsk II agreement, and how the Ukrainians and the French and the Germans and the Americans were all just lying, just to get an opportunity to train the Ukrainian army to NATO standards. Now, there's been talk this week from the previous head of NATO, and bear in mind the current Norwegian guy is already in an extended post and is definitely leaving in October. But his predecessor has been suggesting that army forces from the Baltic states, so that's Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, might be willing to send infantry forces into Ukraine, along with regular Polish army, as opposed to the retabbed Polish army that are now in volunteer corps. And a corps multiple brigades, so we're talking like over 10,000 Poles that supposedly are now, volunteers with the Ukrainian armed forces. Real close to being in an open conflict with Poland. So, when I say that the Latvians and the Lithuanians being willing to send their own armies into Ukraine, it's worth remembering that not only did that conference that we talk about was based in Latvia just yesterday, right, for their strategic communications / propaganda, but that the next NATO head of government summit is in Vilnius, and that happens next month. And that's where Zelensky is pushing hard to be given a date certain to be admitted into NATO as a full member, not like a roadmap, not like an associate member, but like I will be in on the 1st of November, 1st of December, 1st of January, whatever. Right? Now, it appears that he's unlikely to get that, because if not Hungary, then Greece or Turkey will put a card down saying no. But this is the state that we're at, and I doubt that the NATO Secretary General was just randomly speculating about which countries were willing to send in their armies. He's I'm sure still got privileged access to secret documents, may well be talking with their ambassadors. But, it looks like there's a reasonable chance that the next Secretary General of NATO is going to be Mr. Wallace, the current Defence Minister of Great Britain, who's an ex Scots Guardsman, seems to believe that he's living in like 1855 with the charge of the Light Brigade against the Russians in the French and British battle against the Russians when we had Florence Nightingale 175 years ago. And he's obviously got some kind of like Napoleon complex. He's going to be a real loose cannon as the head of NATO. So that's going to really ratchet up the rhetoric to a great extent. So, I mean, that's what, October, less than 4 months away. So there's a lot of very concerning things on the horizon.
Goodness me. And there was also talk that Kaja Kallas of Estonia was a potential candidate. That's even she's saying that that's not possible.
Yeah, I think that's unlikely, to be honest. Now, funnily enough, talking about the Baltic states, there they have what's called BRELL. It's the BRELL. And that's the old Soviet electrical grid that goes through all the Baltic states, Belarusia, all the way to Russia, and then back in. And the Baltic states have been importing natural gas and trying to get connected to Poland so that they didn't face the risk of literally having their electricity just shut off by the Russians. Okay. And that's like the same kind of bizarre situation that we've got oil flowing through Ukraine. We've got ammonia, though that pipeline got attacked this week. We've got gas, and even though they're in a obviously flat out state of war now. Okay. So in the Middle East, just yesterday, the Iraqis got hooked up to the Gulf Cooperation Council electrical grid. So that's a huge improvement for them, and hopefully will give those people more access to running water and 24-hour electricity. Now, interestingly enough, in another major infrastructure development, the president of Iran today went to Tabriz, and there he opened up another section of Iranian railway, 44 kilometers. But that now enables the east-west connection to go into Turkey and provide a seamless rail route all the way from China into Turkey. So that's a huge accomplishment. That's really, really good news for the Iranians. And then their Saturday is like the Christian Sunday. On his Sunday, he is going to fly to Venezuela and then Nicaragua and Cuba and do a circuit of the friendly Latin American countries.
Okay.
So that's very interesting in the context of the president of Venezuela having just been meeting with the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia literally on Tuesday and Wednesday of this week, right? And they're all applying to join BRICS. And the South Africans supposedly told the Iranians either yesterday or today, got reported today, but the conversation may have happened yesterday, that they're definitely going to be in BRICS in the head of government meeting for BRICS in South Africa at the end of August. So, there's been a lot of good news along with a very public attempt to mend relations with Azerbaijan, which has been taking place over the last couple of days.
Yeah.
So there's been quite a lot of Iran news, all good for them. Blinken attacked Iran twice in his meeting with the GCC and also at his end of visit press conference with the Saudi Arabian foreign minister. But what was very significant there is the Saudi Arabian foreign minister said that the Saudis are primarily focused on their Vision 2030. They're not going to be pressured by anybody about either their bilateral relationships or their human rights record, and that they don't see international politics as a zero-sum game. So that's very important that they're not looking at it from a realist point of view, that if somebody gets a benefit, then somebody else has to take a loss.
Yeah,
and
they want a win-win.
Exactly, which is the Chinese phrase for we want a win-win. And he specifically named Iran and China and said that America can have relationships with people that we might consider to be against us, i.e. Israel. And so we can have relationships with people that we want to be friends with. And that doesn't mean that, in our view, we have to cut off relationships with other countries, such as America.
Yeah,
so that was a really, really clear-cut message to the Americans that whilst the Saudis aren't announcing a switch, they're definitely announcing a diversification. Now, the big issue that we have upon us now is this Arab-China business conference that starts on Sunday morning, because it was announced by the Saudi press agency. So that's the official government, like the BBC, right?
Yeah.
Saying that it wasn't, even though Saudi Arabia was hosting it and the Crown Prince was acting as the patron and the foreign minister was going to be attending, that actually there were going to be diplomatic representatives from every single country in the Arab League. So that's 23 countries, 22 plus China, 23 countries in total, and actually specified 23 countries, right? And that there's going to be 3,000 delegates. So obviously a good couple of thousand of those will be business people, all trying to do contracts. And the last paragraph of that very, very long announcement, celebrating all the details of it, right, specifically said that they recognize this as an extension of China's Belt and Road Initiative.
There you go.
So that was just huge, because it wasn't just saying there's going to be more Chinese investment in Saudi Arabia or Qatar or Oman. It's like the entire Arab League.
There you go.
So, I mean, that, if anything, to me, on a non-military sense, was the biggest news of the week. That final paragraph, that China was getting its development relationship into the entire Arab League. And so what would be very interesting to see once the conference ends, it's running for 4 or 5 days, so we'll hear at the end of next week, is what deal's going to announce. And then immediately as that ends, we go into the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum.
Yes.
And there's going to be representatives from scores of countries, probably over 100, all going to that huge annual conference in St. Petersburg. and Putin will give a big speech there. So we're literally going from the Arab-China business conference that's shaping up to be a summit straight into the African Union Putin. This technically is the economic deal, but don't forget, the following month, there's the AU-Russia summit in the same city. Wow. So this is going to set up for the political announcements that will be made in a month's time for the Russians. So all of these things are still happening, and the Americans are just taking loss after loss after loss.
Okay. Yeah. Now we have reached the end of the hour, Simon. So just a bit of housekeeping. We were taken off Facebook for some reason today. It could be a glitch on Facebook. We're not sure. I'll look back into that one. This has been playing on YouTube and Twitter. We'll download and upload this clip to Facebook for the World Series news page there, and of course onto Rumble as well. Just in terms of Rumble, that's a rough-looking thing there. If anyone wants to move over to the page, you're just looking for this as my identifier on Rumble. We're going to work out how to go on live on Rumble from now on as well, so we don't get any more of these glitches. And also we're looking at a show again on Sunday evening out of the United States, which is Monday morning here in Australia, and possibly still getting that gig on InfoWars on the Monday/Tuesday time slot. It's been disappointing that we've been bumped, but aliens are aliens, Simon. That's kind of how it works at the moment in the crazy world of news. It's been a really tough show today because we're learning that the hero that we thought Trump was, we're slowly learning that some of this bravado might be causing more problems, and we don't quite see a way out of all of that. I didn't play the Kash Patel video that's complaining on Fox News about some of the details there in terms of the legal team going against him. We're kind of irrelevant at this stage. We're very sick and tired of the whole process, the two-tier justice system, and of course waiting for someone to sort of come in and save the day. It really is up to us if we're going to stand up to all of this. And to play us out today, I'm going to play a clip where people are calling for boycotts against Aldi, not because of any trans agenda, but because of the digital ID agenda. I'm going to play this now and have a look and just to see what your reaction might be as we close out the show today. But thank you, Simon. We'll continue again, as we said, on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday with more events, and we'll keep everyone up to date. And if you can, check us out, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and Rumble. There's lots of different things there. Last comment, Simon, before I play the clip?
No, sorry that we're not more upbeat. We'll have a lot more news because I'm sure there's going to be a lot more happening on Saturday and Sunday. And please, if people aren't able to watch us in Australia live, which I appreciate, is 4 a.m. Sydney time on Tuesday morning, when hopefully we'll be on with Alex Jones. It will be posted as a podcast about 3 hours later, so you'll be able to watch it more like 7 or 8 a.m. your time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Indeed. Thank you. All right, we're going to play it out now and take a look at this. Are you going to boycott this supermarket chain after you see this video? Unbelievable. Here we go.
So look at this. You're in London, you're on a business trip, you're staying in Greenwich, and you want to buy some food. So you're going to the local Aldi's, like this one, and you think, I'm going to go in here and buy some food so that I can feed myself. And then you approach the barrier, and look, you can't even get in the shop without having a QR code to scan here, or to scan here, and then you can go in and buy things. Now this looks to me like the beginning stages of the digital prison